Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Poema podcast. I'm James Prescott, your host. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Good to have you all back again. And it's another one of those episodes. Jenna DeWitt is back, and we are talking about another Taylor Swift album and doing some kind of analysis and reflection and stuff. And today it's the Tortured Poets Department, Taylor's most recent album. So welcome back, Jenna.
Hey, so good to be here.
Yes, it's always good to have you here. I always enjoy our conversations. And it's always fun talking about Taylor Swift for a podcast as well. I do tag her, and when I release these podcasts, I always tag her in them, like her socials and stuff. So I'm hoping that one day she accidentally runs onto one of them and listens to them. Would be cool if she did, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she has. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So we're going to talk about this album. This is quite a personal album. It's I don't want to say dark album because that's too much of a generalization, but it's very personal. There's a lot of painful stuff that's shared on here. A lot of difficult things that she's experienced that she talks about. A lot of pain, and she's very very honest and vulnerable. And I think it's really powerful. And we're like, what were your kind of overall, like your kind of your reflections on the album, like before we go into specifics?
Yeah, it's funny because I stayed up for the album release. Like it wasn't very late because I'm on the West Coast, and so it's like 9 p.m. for me. And I was like, oh, good. And then had the live tweeting with everybody, and everybody's online, and that was so fun. And then we got this inclination to stay up till 2 Eastern time, which was midnight for me. So or no, it was 11 p.m. for me. And so I'm feeling like, okay, I can do this. Like I can go ahead and listen to it. But some of the East Coast friends said, you know what, that's kind of it. I need to go to bed. 2 a.m. is not going to work for me. But it was just early enough that I was like, I can do this. It's okay. And then by the end of it, like you're listening to another like 31 songs in total, was like, oh my goodness, that was hours and hours of content. Like my brain was fried. I did not have any opinions because it was too much to take in. And so over the next couple of days, I tried to listen to it more, but it was kind of triggering my anxiety and depression. And so I decided, you know what, let's take this a little bit slower. Let's hold off on this. But then over the last couple of days or the last week or so, I've been listening to it a lot more and reading the lyrics and everything. And I really see why the poet thing is so key because these lyrics are just really brilliant in the way she's done them. So I've come to appreciate it a lot more. It's still probably not my favorite, but it had a really hard run in there because I was like so in love with Midnights, and then Taylor's version 1989 came out, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And so anything that came after Midnights and 1989 was set up for failure because you can't reach that high of a bar. So in my
Yeah,
world,
that's what I mean.
nothing beats 1989. So
Taylor does raise the bar so high for herself.
she
It's
really
true.
does.
I
Yeah.
mean, like
So good.
I loved I love folklore, and in
Hmm.
particular, and then um, Red, the Taylor's version of Red was just like that was out of this world, and I loved Midnights as well. I really love Midnights. That's um, just because a lot of these, it's always the stories behind them that resonate for me. Midnights was powerful for me because I often stay up past midnight and write stuff in the middle of the night, and interesting stuff comes out, and just knowing that about those songs made it really interesting. I think that's the fascination for me with Taylor Swift's music is the stories behind it and the stories that are in these songs, more than just the musical stuff. Like, I mean, obviously, I love the music as well, but yeah, because it's almost like we're getting a commentary on her life from herself. And of course, about some of the things we won't know about. Some of the things we probably will, because Taylor Swift gets reported on all the time. But and I expect her next one will be a lot happier. Her next album will be a lot happier than this one. Judging by things that are going on, that'll be an interesting one though, given the kind of the press attention on her relationship at the moment. But that'll be
Yeah.
an interesting album to hear. But that'll probably be next year, I expect.
Well, and
Um, Yeah, but
Taylor,
this one.
sorry.
No, go on. No,
Oh,
please.
Taylor herself, what she says about the album is she says it's also like I said, very depressing. She said it's very fatalistic, longing, pining away, lost dreams. She says, I think that's a very fatalistic album, and there are a lot of very dramatic lines about life and death, and I love you, it's ruining my life. Like these are very hyperbolic, dramatic things to say, but it's that kind of album. It's about a dramatic, artistic, tragic kind of take on love and loss. So that, and she says even in that first song is kind of laying out these tragic concepts of, I love you, it's ruining my life. We can't have happy endings. There's nothing positive about this. It's just pure longing, whether reciprocated or not, and pining and the death and ending of things. So I thought that was a really good to know that she's aware.
Yeah, I mean,
This is
yeah,
a very dramatic one. And
absolutely.
she,
Yeah, very self-conscious.
yeah, yeah, it's self-aware in that like she also knows that these are, like she said, moving through the stages of grief, that there's some denial in here and some anger and bargaining and things. And so we can talk about the themes in all of those songs, but stages of grief being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yeah, I also want to make clear actually with stages of grief that I think the stages of grief are real, but I don't think they're a linear thing. I think it's
Hmm.
not. I've always said this. I've said this on my podcast before that it's not a like a 5-step process that you go through all these different things and then you're done. Like it's an ongoing like circle of grief, like, and it does heal over time, but like it's all these things come up in different orders, right? And like at different times when you least expect it. And I think that the nature of this album shows that as well. The way the songs are kind of written and the order of the songs and stuff, it shows that. Yeah, it's a sometimes there's almost a bit of she's out of control in the sense of her emotions are kind of taking her different places that she's not in control of. Um, uh, yeah, which is normal when you're going through grief and stuff. Like that's totally human experience, and so that's why it's quite a brave album because to share all that with people, with the whole world, because millions of people listen to these albums and is very vulnerable, yeah, and
Hmm.
courageous. But that's Taylor Swift. She does that all the time, doesn't she? So this is how she processes stuff
Yeah.
with her music, with her art. So
Well, and it's very interesting with these eras of how this fits into the eras that she made the like leading up to this album. She had noticed that the fans were commenting on these stages of grief, and she made specific playlists for each stage from past songs, and it was quite enlightening. Sometimes the lovey-dovey happy songs ended up on the denial playlist,
that doesn't
and
surprise me at all. Like,
yeah, some of the sad songs you might expect to be depression ended up in the acceptance. And, so it's interesting seeing how she sees the songs, but the theme of grief is just really evident throughout her music. Of I think bargaining and anger combine in the song I'm Gonna Get You Back. She hasn't decided if
yeah,
she wants him back as a boyfriend or is getting him back as in revenge. So
yes, that's it. Yeah, absolutely right.
I love the Taylor
Yeah,
Swift wordplay.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
we see acceptance and depression in So Long London. And there's a song that's LOML. And that usually stands for love of my life. But in this song, it's loss of my life, which is poignant.
Ah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I saw denial and anger colliding on Down Bad and I Can Fix Him. It's like, oh, maybe I can't fix this guy. Um,
Hmm.
and we
Oh,
see
yeah.
I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. We'll talk about that one is hardcore denial. Denial, denial, denial.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And the bargaining and the prophecy of like, somebody change it. And I hate it here. Is like, I'm going to go escape to another world. And then we see the anger in Cassandra. And then we finally get acceptance in the manuscript. And then thank you, Amy. Is like, you know what? Things suck. But, I'm grateful that I had to go through all that. So we can talk
Yeah.
about each one of those, but just curious if you see some consistent themes throughout as you're listening through it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, yeah, I mean, that one about London, Farewell London. I was like, that was because I think it's because I'm from London as well. Like
Mhm.
that was a like a kind of and yeah, like less about leaving things behind and like there's a kind of lament in that song, like almost like he doesn't want it to end, but it is, and and the regret and a lot of that is in there. I was moved by that song a lot, like because there's all sorts of ways you could interpret those lyrics if you're coming out of different experiences, because grief is different for everyone, right? We all experience grief in different ways. I mean, all of us eventually lose a parent. All of us eventually, um, lose loved ones or friends or whatever. But there's other kinds of grief. There's losing a job, or there's in a relationship, which is what Taylor's talking about. There's broken relationships that you didn't want to end. Friendships, even. There's having to leave an old life behind, even if it's for something better, but a life that's comfortable, that was safe, and then you have to leave it behind. That's kind of what I'm having to do at the moment,
Mhm.
because what's coming is going to be good and really and healthy and life giving and everything, but you also have to leave things behind that you've been used to, and that's painful. Like so, yeah, yeah. I definitely felt a lot of grief energy in this album for sure. Like it was all over the place. Like it was because some of the songs have different. There's a different tone to different songs. Like there's different energy in different songs, and it's like all these emotions. They're all linked with grief, but it's all different expressions at different times. It actually shows that grief isn't linear. Like the album shows that grief is not linear. Like it's um and like it's not just emotion either. It's something that's in your body. I'm actually writing something about this at the moment about embodied grief. Like it's something that you experience in your body, and like that's what's coming out of Taylor. It's not even anger. It's like it's a different type of anger. It's kind of grief anger. Like it's anger that um that someone's gone and you can't do anything about it. Like I remember when like it's just that anger where you just want to go up and scream just for the sake of it. Like it's just raw. It's something in your body. It's not just an emotional thing. It's like in your body, and that's what's coming out. It's like I think Taylor said that this album was quite cathartic for her, like writing it,
Yeah,
and I'm not
definitely.
surprised. Like I've written a lot of stuff in my time, and I know writing poetry and just writing generally is really can be really cathartic. Like just you're getting it out of your body, like and
Mhm.
putting it out. And so, in a sense, like Taylor may not. I don't know if she'll ever sing these songs on tour or anything, but it felt to me like this album was more about Taylor getting stuff out of her rather than I'm going to make a new album for all my fans. Like it's just I
Yeah.
just want to get this out, and like that's why there's so many songs. I think
Mhm.
like
Absolutely.
it's like a journal in a way, um, and it's not meant to be coherent because grief isn't coherent,
Yeah.
um, and that's kind of why I love it. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's my favorite Taylor album at all, but like it is really powerful, and it's not easy to listen to because I couldn't listen to it in one go either. I think I
Mhm.
listened to the first four songs and I was like, okay, I need a break. This is heavy. Like,
Yeah.
like it was really heavy stuff. Like, and um, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it doesn't like fit with what record companies might want, but it's art, like, and I love that. I love the art when artists just make the art that's in their body to make, where regardless of what capitalism says or what record companies say or critics or anything, just like make the stuff that's in you because that's more powerful anyway. And I love that stuff more than kind of not the manufactured stuff, but the kind of traditional like poppy album or whatever. That's just okay. I've got an album to make and I'm going to record this album because I've got a contract, whatever.
Mhm.
But this album is definitely not that.
And it's very interesting format wise because Taylor's big enough that she can do kind of whatever she wants. And we saw
Yeah.
very much the same with Beyonce with Cowboy Carter, is kind of jumping around to different genres and be like, I can do this. I can do a whole album of amazing stuff, which is interesting because in the industry, you would think that everything would be going toward TikTok sound bites. So not even like one radio hit single, but it's just like small enough choruses and seconds of music that grab you so fast. And they have to be repeatable and they have to be relatable to everybody. And whereas like Taylor goes so hyper specific into her own life and these vivid imageries about like what kind of suit he's wearing or what kind of man he is, and super metaphor heavy writing.
Mm.
That I'm sure somebody is going to find a way to do this on a TikTok reel, but or Instagram reel, TikTok video, but it's really more of a longer work, a full manuscript to use her words.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, it has that feel of a like it has that feel of a journal.
Mhm.
It's kind of out of order and you know um, a little incoherent, but it communicates something really powerful, like and very personal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the songs.
Yes.
I don't know where to start really. I've got
Well,
quite a few that I'm interested in, but like, what song did you want to start with?
okay, so I know your podcast covers everything from faith deconstruction to grief. We've already talked about the stages of grief. We've talked about several things from the Enneagram in my past episodes. So go back and listen to those as well, especially with Taylor and the Enneagram. And we've talked about faith deconstruction and Taylor as well in previous episodes. But one we haven't really talked about, you and I, is Doctor Who. So
Yes.
I want to start off on a funny note because this album is so depressing. So we'll get to some really serious stuff as we go along. But Down Bad, it just is really funny because she's like, "Did you beam me up in a cloud of sparkling dust just to do experiments on? Tell me I'm the chosen one. The world is bigger than us. And then you sent me back to where I came from." And then she says, "In a field in my same old town that feels hollow now, they'll think I'm nuts if I talk about the existence of you." And it's just so Doctor Who companion because it's like, imagine that you get taken on a ride with the doctor to a fort on some planet where they can all understand it. How dare you think it's romantic, leaving me safe and stranded? And it's like, this is like 3000% like Rose Tyler and Martha and Donna and all of these companions, Amy, and it's like I haven't seen
It really is.
the new ones.
Yeah.
There's
Like,
about to be some new ones, yeah. But it was really funny that I thought, as a Doctor Who fan, that you would appreciate Down Bad of this alien abduction story.
yeah, no, absolutely. It really does. Like when you read the lyrics, it sounds like this song of lament by one of the companions. Like it could be any of them, really. But especially ones that really, love the Doctor, like Rose and Martha, and people and
Mhm.
others, that are,
Oh,
that kind
yeah,
of.
so many.
But there's always an element of grief in Doctor Who. Actually, like I mean, just the show
Mhm.
generally, but like you always feel it coming. Either a Doctor's coming to the end of their time before they regenerate, or the companions are leaving, and they've got to kind of just get on with their life. Like there's that episode of School Reunion where David Tennant's Doctor goes to
Yeah,
the school and ends up seeing one of his old companions. Like, and she hasn't seen him for decades.
yeah,
And then later on in the episode, they have this kind of moment where she's like, "Why didn't you come back? Why did you just leave me? Like, why? I thought we were special. I thought, and it's like, well, I moved on. I have to live on. I don't, I don't die. I regenerate. And
hmm
there's all of that stuff is covered in that episode, and that's this song. Like, like you took me away and showed me the stars and stuff, and then like just left me here. Like,
yeah. And I
um,
think a lot of us have had those experiences of maybe a short-term job, like a fellowship or an internship. Um, I studied abroad in England, very much felt that. I was like, oh no, now I have to go back to like my normal life, or like a church camp high, or like, you've had a really close encounter with Jesus or an emotional worship night or whatever. And then like you go back into your normal doubts and your hard life. And I mean, anything could be that, of having this transcendent experience, and then grieving that being over and not knowing how to move on. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting song, but that was more silly,
No,
so we can move on.
that's fun. I like that. I love that. Taylor Swift and Doctor Who. Like I had actually had one of her songs on Folklore. I think was I can't remember which one. It was track 5. I know that was track 5.
Yeah.
Was mentioned like these two people that were close friends and then kind of ended up becoming enemies. And I was thinking the way she wrote it, I was like, "This you're talking about Smallville here. Like, you've clearly watched Smallville. This is Clark Kent and Lex Luthor in Smallville. Like it was so obvious to me anyway. Like and even when she talked about it in the documentary that they made about the way she was talking about it was almost like she was alluding to it, and I was like, wow, like this is really cool. Like it made me like Taylor because it's like if she's into Superman, I love Superman. I'm into all of that.
Yeah.
Like, and if she's into it, that's really really cool. Like because you wouldn't expect you would like I wouldn't have expected her to be into that kind of thing, but if she is, that's really really cool. But I'm not really surprised actually because she loves good stories, and they're good stories. So, but yeah,
And
that's
then
cool.
in the reverse, I think somebody needs to write a show or a movie or something about the Taylor songs of her committing a crime, maybe murdering a cheating husband or something. I don't know. We've got this whole like this previous narrative of the friend not showing up to the Olive Garden, and so or the alibi was that she was at the Olive Garden, and then we get moving to Florida, and so with
Yes,
Florence,
Florida.
Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine comes in on Florida, and so it's like I just want to see this like TV show written about these songs of like someone having to wait out the shitstorm back in Texas by getting a timeshare in Destin, Florida, and all the shenanigans that they get up to trying to evade the law, like.
This is an album you could probably write a movie around. Yeah, like
Yeah, it'd be really funny. Anyway, she's very
I
story,
wouldn't
story,
you
story,
wouldn't bet
story.
against Taylor Swift being able to do that as well. Yeah, yeah. So absolutely, cool. Well, That's one song. Like, and that's a cool way to start because it's a bit like a bit
Yeah.
lighter on what is a depressing album for sure.
Mhm.
And that's not meant as a criticism, really. It's just true. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what was the next song you were thinking about?
So I wanted to go back to So Long London because you were talking about how that's meaningful for you, and it is for me as well. Um, so Taylor says like or we might say like there's an organization, we might say, but for her, it's a person that was kind of preying on her sadness, and she just can't keep going like this, and she's given everything to it. She says, "I didn't opt in to be your admin out. I founded the club that she's heard great things about. I left all I knew. You left me with the house by the heath. I stopped CPR. After all, it's no use. The spirit was gone. We would never come to. I'm pissed off you let me give you all that youth for free." And whoa, like I founded this club, the spirit is gone, the youth for free. It just screamed church to me. And I'm not the only one. Jamie Golden was talking about this on her podcast as well. I just think of all the ministries I've invested in, the church I did so much publicity for free, the things I founded and had to leave. And I'd say, then they say we're the ones who abandoned them. Like, what? That's not okay. And you might say that's justified, that people have a right to feel upset about that. But like Taylor says, you say I abandoned the ship, but I was going down with it. My white
Yeah,
knuckle fine grip.
yeah. I think I know why now. Going back over those lyrics, why it hit me. Wasn't just the London thing. I think I've been dealing a lot with recently for the first time dealing with my trauma from being in YWAM, 25 years ago, pretty much. 18 months after my mother died, um, and you know, just after 9/11 as well, having watched that on TV. So, and those things never got addressed that year at all. Like, shouldn't have even been allowed to do it, but they were kind of manipulated for, you know, free labor. In fact, I paid them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, and all of those lyrics kind of like I gave because I gave them a lot of my youth, I gave them a lot of my time, I gave them my energy and my money, and like I didn't get much back, and
Mhm.
all I got back was telling me that I should be a Christian writer and had to have a big platform and be successful, and that led me to kind of bury my grief and not deal with my grief for like a long time. Um, and then I gave myself to another church, which was good at first, and then like in the second, like I was there for what 10 years, 11 years, and the last 5 years of it were probably not great. And again, I started things like the same with you. I started a home group. I started different little projects there, like, and and in the end, I left, and people there don't. I haven't really had much contact with them. They don't contact me anymore. They don't even reply to my messages sometimes.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the reasons that song hit, because it's a lot about that. You know,
Yeah.
being part of something and being part of a community or a relationship that meant a lot to you at the time, and you gave a lot of yourself to, and then kind of leaving it behind and having to leave it behind because it was going down, like the ship sinking ship. And But you moved on, and that didn't move on. They didn't move on, and maybe they're still there. You know.
Well,
Yeah.
and not only did we do our, due diligence and being, devoted to it as much as they asked, but we went above and beyond. We had the white knuckle dying grip. Like you say, I abandoned the ship, but I was going down with it. I had the white knuckle dying grip, holding tight to your quiet resentment. My friend said, "Isn't right to be scared every day of a love affair." And I think like so much of that is with church too, of like, just
Yeah.
constantly having to, or an organization or a job or anything, like constantly having to fight for your status in the friend group. It just reminds me of what Sarah Bessey says in her book Field Notes. She's addressing those of us who left a church or a faith altogether. And she says, "You're here because you still dared to hope. You took it seriously, didn't you? You dared to hope the gospel was true. You dared to hope that Jesus meant what he said and God is love. You dared to believe that the church could be a sanctuary for the wounded and the misfits and the marginalized. You dared to hope that we were all made in the image of God. You dared to hope prayer changes things. You dared to hope that you would be loved and that you could love in return." And I hear that in so many echoes of Taylor's songs. We talked about like "You're Losing Me." There was some of that in there as well. Is like
Mm.
we're the soldiers in your army, like literally the soldiers in the army of the Lord, and like don't you ignore us because we we were the ones fighting for this to exist. We founded this club, and so yeah, I think there's so much grief in that because we aren't walking away because we weren't invested or because it's the easy thing to do. We're walking away because we were so heavily invested and we couldn't devote ourselves to it any longer.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's powerful, isn't it?
Mhm.
Um, that's powerful about being part of something that's toxic and not realizing it at the time, and then having to leave it behind, um, and not wanting to go back either. You know,
Mhm.
and that for me is hard because I do find it hard to go back. Like I don't think I don't know if I will ever be able to. And that's not because I don't have a love for Jesus, because I do very much still. Um, I think the institution is the thing I have the problem with, and the language of it, and the toxic parts of it. Because I know that there's still beautiful parts of it, you know. And I'll be honest. Well, you're one of the people that gives me hope for that. That there's still hope
Mhm.
for that institution, like, because you're still there and you still have hope. So that kind of gives me hope. So, I hope that's encouraging. But it's, because I did lose a lot of hope in it, and I still find it hard to talk to God as the Christian God anyway, because I found it hard to forgive Him for my trauma. Like, you just let this happen. Like, I thought you could do anything, and you didn't do anything. Like, you know, I like from the time my mum died, I was unable to have a healthy relationship with God. It was
Yeah.
all about Jesus from then on. Like, and now my spirituality is a bit different. It's not bound by one kind of religion, but I certainly still have an awareness of a consciousness of, a God kind of consciousness, and in the universe, and energy, and power, and all that kind of thing. But it's not in the same way. and I couldn't even use the word God for a long time because it was so painful. Um, so yeah, I mean that's why that song, yeah, embodies all of that. Like I could have called it "So Long God," like if I'd written it, like,
Yeah.
but yeah, so yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's another part of this. So, on the one hand, it's really hard to kind of be like, God, what were you doing? What were you thinking? And then, like, stepping away from a church. But then I think the next one I was going to talk about is, But Daddy, I Love Him. And that's like, we're getting out of here.
Mm,
Like, we have hit the anger stage and we are going hard. And it's like, hit the brake, hit the gas because we're running through the fences. Like, literally, she's like
yeah.
using this getaway car metaphor again. And like she did a Reputation. And she says, I forget if this was ever fun. I just learned these people only raise you to cage you. Woo, big church feelings.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. I mean that
yeah.
song is like I instantly thought of purity culture when I listened to this song. Like it's all about whether she intended it or not. It is literally about what purity culture is all about. Like it's like the caging, and I was like, oh my god, yes, this is what they do. They tell you you've got to get married, you've got to have children, you've got to it's got to be. This is how it is. Like sometimes it does happen that certain people are kind of almost pushed together. Like they grow up in church and they're kind of like their families nudge them together, and they like
Mhm.
there is. I don't know. I've never seen that happen here. It doesn't happen in the UK, but I'm pretty sure it does happen in America. Yeah.
Happened to
So
me.
happened to you? Oh my god!
Absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
my word! I'm so sorry.
For sure. And you get their Sarah's and Hannah's and their Sunday best, clutching their pearls, sighing, What a mess. I just learned these people try to save you because they hate you. And wow, like that it seems on the nose. Like most of the time when you and I are talking about religious deconstruction language and Taylor stuff, we're taking a song that she meant to be about romance or about the industry or something else or a feud with
Yeah.
Kim Kardashian and like making it about church. No, this is like literally about church. Like Taylor is specifically calling out Christian hypocrisy with the Sunday best and the pearl clutching and the people who try
Absolutely.
to save you because they hate you. I 1000% feel that as a queer Christian is that all of these people are saying like, "Oh, we just love you and that's why we want to save you from hell." And it's like, "No, that's homophobia. Like you just straight up hate us." So the people who express love through faux concern for me, it feels just very silly. It's not actual empathy, it's hate. Um, they're barely sounding inviting enough to pretend like they are the victim when you reject them. It's like, well, I tried to be nice to you and you rejected me, so you're actually the hateful one. And it's like, no, we're not going to change. And as Taylor says, no, you can't pray for us. I do not want your prayers.
Yeah, I know that this song is loaded, and the title is brilliant. I do, it's but Daddy, I love him.
Mm-hmm.
Like stay away from her. Like this kind of, she's met this person who's like doesn't fit their stereotype, doesn't fit their plans, doesn't fit their kind of what they want in a partner for their for their daughter, and she's like, I'm like I know he's crazy, but he's the one I want. Like I'd rather burn my life down than listen to one more second of all this griping and moaning. My name is mine to disgrace. It's like I don't cater to these vipers dressed in empath's clothing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we just talked about, isn't it? Like those, they were saying, "Oh, look, I'm just doing this to protect you. I'm just doing this like because I care about you." Like, no, like you're not empathetic at all. You just hate me.
Yes.
You're vipers. And it's interesting she uses the viper as well because that's something that's biblical as well, right?
Yeah.
The serpent. It's like yeah, it's brilliant. This song, I do like it.
I
Yeah.
love how she has kept going with the snake imagery of like the snake imagery originated with the Kim Kardashian feud as like Kim's fans came and left a bunch of snakes in Taylor's Instagram comments. That's why Taylor doesn't have Instagram
Ah,
comments
right.
anymore. But it's become a symbol of Taylor using it for the Reputation tour and then also for and this like even talking about right now like the most recent stuff the vipers it's not only biblical imagery which I think was intentional but like also that like the snake metaphor being like you know these snakes are kind of coming to get me and that callback to Reputation era that's really funny so but yeah absolutely with the vipers and the empath closing and like it's our good name to tarnish. And I think as queer Christians, especially, it's like, it's not your reputation. Like they'll say, oh, but what will other people think? And oh, it's my reputation that you're, if you come out as queer, then that makes our church look bad, or it makes our family look bad, or it makes our friend group look bad. And like, what will
Yeah.
people say about me if I'm friends with a queer person, or I have a family member, or I've, if I let you lead in the children's ministry or from the front of the service or whatever, that's going to look bad on us. And it's like, no, it's my good name. It is me. It's my reputation. This is actually about me right now. And it's not actually about what you look like, or being too liberal or with deconstruction or whatever. People are so worried for us. And it's like, no, it's my good name and I can do whatever I want with that. And God save the most judgmental creeps who say they want what's best for me.
Mm.
But it's actually about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She's right in there. That is like the kind of the anger bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and actually, like I've seen this before. Like there is a stage because deconstruction is basically a grieving process, right? There's a stage of that process where this happens. I've seen it on social media. I've actually done it myself. Like I had a period myself where I was really, really angry with like the whole world and the whole institution of like and anything to do with religion. And I was just like, yeah. And that passes. It passes. Like, but you see a lot. I've seen it in other people, and I used to like before I got out of it myself. I used to kind of judge people for it, but now I'm just like, no, no, this is just a part of their process. Like this is part of their grieving, part of their
Mm-hmm.
like. This is just stuff that's been in there all the time and it's just coming out. Like, and so I kind of let. I don't not about let, but I don't critique it. I just kind of just like don't comment on it. I just kind of and I don't respond to it, and I don't take it personally either. Like I just observe it, and knowing that it'll pass because there is a because that's part of grief, and that's part of leaving that stuff behind if it's in part of your whole life, because you're realizing a lot of things that went on that you were part of or that were done to you that you're angry about, and you realize things about the institution or whatever that you're angry about, or about the theology that you were part of, like that you're angry about, and that's normal. And you're like, oh, how could I have been part of that? How could I have done this to people? Like, how can they do this to people? Like, it's just a normal part of grief, and a lot of people have used Twitter to process their deconstruction grief. Like, that's a real thing. And people have been harmed in the process, unfortunately, and relationships have been broken, and like that's sad that happened, and it shouldn't really have happened, but it has. Like, and that's just people have been tweeting what Taylor has been writing in her songs, right? That's basically what people were doing, and yeah, and so we've got to have a bit of grace for that, I guess. Whilst also, if harm is caused, we have to call it out, but
Mm-hmm.
and hold people accountable for that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you also have to. I'm not. Yeah, like
Right.
I'm very
I,
much. I've talked about this tonight with somebody else actually. That like if harm is caused, people have to take responsibility for that and have to
yes,
be held accountable to that. That is always
exactly.
that's one of my biggest maxims. Like intent doesn't matter when harm is caused. Like when harm is caused, you have to take responsibility for it. And I've had to do that, and other people I know have had to do that. And like but that's yeah. But so obviously you take responsibility for people, like you call people out on when
Yeah.
harm is caused, but that is also a normal part of their process. Like the anger is not at the person that they've caused harms to. It's all grief. That's why when you process grief, it's important to do it in a healthy way where people can't be harmed. Like
Yeah.
journaling, therapy, all those things like are really, really important. Like and try to not to do it on social media. Like if at all possible. Like but you can't tell someone that when they're in the midst of it because they don't see it. Like I didn't see it when I was in the midst of it. I did see it once. Somebody called it out once because I said something that I shouldn't have done, and fortunately I didn't lose any friends over it. But I apologized, I made amends, I took responsibility, and I realized what was going on, and I just stood and I stood back and didn't do that anymore. Like I just wrote it out privately. I journaled it, like, and I dealt with it in therapy, and that was healing. But yeah, oh yeah, I want to make sure that people know that that harm is never. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
I do want to
Correct.
go on record and say we're talking about this song as a metaphor for like purity culture or queer Christianity or like leaving a friend group or what, like righteous anger of like, yeah, I don't care what you have to say about me, whatever. But she very much did need to be held accountable because the person that this song is about is not a good person and was saying harmful things and was being, I heard someone describe him as the human equivalent of a cigarette. And
I don't know. Is this person like well known or is he famous?
yes, yes. So
Was it?
it's public knowledge that it's about Maddie Healy, who is the lead singer of a band called the 1985. And to be fair, I love the music of the 1985. I've liked it for a long time. But then I found out that the lead singer is not a good person. He has said some very racist things. He's not been apologetic about some of the things that he has said that he should be. And so I think that Taylor definitely takes him to task when we finally will get to the smallest man who ever lived. And instead of, with Joe, it's like, oh, this was so sad. And, I hope you're having a bad night, but like, you're going to move on. And like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to see each other in another life kind of thing. Whereas like with the smallest man who ever lived, she's like, you should be in jail. Like like she leaves no
Yeah,
room for Maddie to be a good person in this. She very much ends up like one of these relationships was it's sad to see this fade away. And I felt like I was in prison, but I got out and I ran directly into the most harmful thing I could be doing. And I think she has some self-awareness as we read this album in a complete manuscript and not just this one chapter of it, that she recognizes this was not a good decision. So I just want to be aware
yeah.
that like we're talking about this one song, but we know that absolutely the Sarahs and Hannahs had a excellent point. So
Well said. Thanks for saying that. That's important. It's important to have context for some of these things because then it helps you understand them, right?
mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. I do like that song. That's one of the best. Certainly in terms of like the lyrics and what it's trying to say. It's very direct.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what's the next song you wanted to look at?
Okay, so I kind of wanted to okay, so I just want to address because we always talk about religious deconstruction is that there's a song called Guilty as Sin. This song is pure sex. Like I don't see a lot in here other than,
Oh yes,
oh, this is
yes,
very sexy. But it's really sad too because it's like she's talking about feeling bored and imprisoned by this relationship that she has previously described in other religious imagery as a false god on another very sexy song. So it's kind of sad to see this guy who would like a false god, like loving him religiously, as she says in the song, and then like moving on to somebody else because she feels so bored by that false god that she's now moving into this one. And is she guilty if she's just lusting over him and they haven't actually done anything yet? So that's a lot of what this song is about with the religious imagery of like, what if I roll the stone away? They're going to crucify me anyway.
yes, yeah,
What if the way you hold me is actually what's holy? If long suffering propriety is what they want from me, I don't know you've haunted me so stunningly. I choose you and me religiously. And she flips the order there of like she's going to reveal her crush because they're going to crucify her for even thinking bad thoughts about him. And so it's like a resurrection sort of thing. But she also feels like they're going to cancel her or ostracize her for stepping outside of that long suffering propriety. Anyway, she might as well go ahead and have an affair with this guy, which is terrible reasoning. Please do not do that. But she says it might like bring a new life, like the rolling a stone away is like a new life and resurrection.
yeah.
So I think there's an idealized thing going on there. It's religiously, it's not super tangible. This relationship doesn't actually happen. There's not really grounded in reality of being aware of each other's faults and strengths and weaknesses. So maybe there's a spiritual connection way, but it's like a lot of this religiously is kind of like living in an intangible space or in her head or in her imagination. That's not super grounded in the
It's
real life reality.
it's like that thing when you're in something that's safe but kind of boring at times,
Mm-hmm.
and then something that's different and like new and exciting appears, and of course you can idealize what that is, right? That can be anything as well. Like, I mean, that happens like politically when you kind of like, where it's like, oh, this is new and different and like nostalgic and like, and fun. interesting and like it makes me feel good and stuff. So maybe it's good, but actually it's not.
Hmm.
And that there's so many different applications of that, including relationships, which obviously this is what that's about with for Taylor. But like, but yeah, there's so many different applications of that. Like, and it's um, yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. So we couldn't get away from this in this podcast of doing the Enneagram 3 thing. It's like, what does grief look like specifically for Taylor Swift, the Enneagram 3 Wing 4? So we just saw the Wing 4 in the like idealized relationship or trying to escape. And the I hate it here is very much in the like,
yeah,
I'm just going
yeah.
to live in my mind in a little castle. Um, but now we've got the 3. Who's Afraid of Little Ol' Me? This song is amazing. It's my favorite type of Taylor song where she is mad at the music industry. She's mad at the media. It's not about a romance per se, but it is about power and public criticism and how she handles her power and how people use their power against her. But I do think that everyone has had that experience of being an object of public scrutiny. Maybe it's in a church meeting that is being held about you, or in your hometown passing around rumors, or a friend group that is talking behind your back, or it's like I just see this Enneagram 3 talk like this. And if you want to hear more about the Enneagram and Taylor, we have an episode about that. But she says, I want to snarl and show you just how disturbed this has made me. You wouldn't last an hour in the asylum where they raised me. Yes, girl. That's become a meme, of course. It's like the asylum where they raised you. Like, I don't know, James, what do you think? What's the asylum where they raised you that some people
Well, like that could be a lot of things. I mean, for me, my childhood trauma. That could be living,
mm-hmm.
living with the mother who who had poor short term memory, and my dad who was kind of struggling to deal with it and struggling to carry the whole family emotionally and stuff, and my mum being depressed and drinking, and me getting bullied at school and then coming home to all of that, and being autistic and on the and ADHD. Didn't know it at the time, but I was, and all of that, like, and that was the asylum that I was raised in. You could say that, like, it was a bit crazy there, like, and I don't blame anyone for it. I've done all my forgiveness work for my parents and whatever, but like, yeah, and then of course in the church as well. I mean, like, the church I was raised in was relatively healthy. It was egalitarian. We had women in leadership roles, like, and this is in the 1990s as well, by the way. So it was ahead of a lot of the curve. So it wasn't that toxic. The church I grew up in, like, it was when I got to university that I encountered kind of the Pentecostal stuff, like, which is normal for students, by the way. Like, it's totally
Oh yeah,
normal.
same.
Like, um, and that was actually more harmful for me than what I'd had before. Like,
Same.
I grew up in the Methodist Church, you see, in the
Same.
UK, and then I ended up in the Methodist Church I went to at university was more Pentecostal because they had a young minister there who was really into all the Pentecostal stuff, and a lot of students went there, and whatever. So yeah, I mean, that you could say that's the asylum that I was raised in, and then I obviously lost my mother when I was 23, so I was still quite young. I don't know if that counts as being
Yeah.
raised in, but like,
Yeah.
my first like 25 years on this earth were not great, and because I had the YWAM just after that, and I didn't realize that was a trauma at the time, but it was. So yeah, that's the asylum that I was raised in.
Hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's a powerful line. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love
Um,
how she's finally allowing herself to get mad. So she's like, I want to show you how disturbed this made me. Like she's not pretending in this song. We'll get to the next one where she's pretending, but uh, she's mad about the witchy accusations of like, she has some of this witchy imagery going on, and there's all these Christians now, and I'm like, yes, come for them. But it's like these evangelicals, these conservatives who are like, oh, you're a Satanist if you listen to Taylor Swift, or you're Taylor's of the devil or whatever, and she's coming for them, and she's like, everybody says that she's crazy, but you caged me, and then you called me crazy. I am what I am because you trained me. And woo, I feel that. You feel that?
mm,
Of like, if
yeah.
you are going to raise up and teach children to like be loving and seek justice and do mercy and all of this stuff that like we are trained to do, of caring for our neighbors and bless the poor and everything it says to do in the gospels, and then we turn around and try to do those things, and you call us woke or Marxist or socialist or whatever. It's like, no, like we're just doing what you trained us to do, by loving each other and accepting everyone, and just like Jesus did. So it's so maddening when and so gaslighting. So I've just heard so many deconstructing people say that those words exactly. Of I wasn't mean or bitter or jaded or any of this to start with. I didn't leave because I was, bitter about it. Like it was you guys in the church or in the community or your family who made
Yeah.
me this way. You trained me. So the righteous anger songs have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, and it's like there is an element of that as well, that when you grow up in like capitalism, not just in the church, that you're taught to think a certain way about the world, and this is how the world works, this is how the world is, this is this is just how it is, right? And you have to just accept it. And you're so indoctrinated into it, you don't realize that it's an indoctrination. And then, of course, with evangelicalism in America, especially, like there's that extra layer of it because it's kind of because evangelicalism kind of goes alongside that in a way. It's kind of it runs alongside it. It's like the similar values. It's like, and again, it's indoctrination, and you don't realize it. And um, I think for me, like my parents weren't like heavily religious, right? They had faith and they went to church regularly, but they weren't like legalistic in like their application of those things at home.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like that at all, and they were kind of very egalitarian and like, my dad, my dad always treated my mum as an equal. Like
Yeah.
there was none, there was, and we knew that our parents accepted us as we are. We wouldn't have had any shame in coming out to them.
Mm.
Like I wouldn't have ever. Like,
Nice.
um, which is like I didn't realize how much of a blessing that was
Yeah.
actually. Like because I just assumed like 'cause I didn't really get into theology until I was in my 20s. Like until I started deconstructing. So I was just like, oh well, yeah, well, God loves everyone, right? Like and I didn't really deal with the difficult stuff like at all. Like you think at university there were a lot of people that if I'd actually asked them their theology on some of that stuff would have been toxic. Like, but I didn't know that. I was too
Right.
naive, like almost like, but probably in a good way because I'm almost glad I didn't know that because that might have made it more difficult. Like, so yeah, but yeah, it's just those systems that they make you think a certain way, and what I've learned since I've done all my therapy and embodiment work, my spiritual direction, all of that healing stuff, like that I've kind of removed myself from that. Like I've kind of removed my body and my consciousness from that system. Like, and I see it for what it is. Like, I think when you do healthy deconstruction, you can unlearn these toxic systems and actually not just like intellectually or whatever, but you're in your body. Like you actually, your body unlearns these rhythms and realizes that actually this is not what how humans are meant to live, right? And actually, that's like for me, that's like part of what Jesus was about. Was this is how you're meant to be human in the world. This is how we're meant to exist as human in the world. It's not part of these oppressive systems. Like he stood up to oppressive systems, like which are like not sound familiar to capitalism, right? Like it's like the machine. Everyone's a machine. Everyone's part of the system. Like, and he stood up against that, like and suffered the consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that's, and I feel like in a way that like leaving the church and even kind of I haven't left Christianity per se, but not like using that label as much because I feel that it's a bit too restrictive. I've actually kind of become more human. And when you become more human and you live outside those systems, it makes living in those systems harder, but because
Yeah.
you're aware of what you're going into. Like when I go into the office 2 days a week, I'm more exhausted like than I ever used to be when I was commuting to work every day because my body knows and I know that this isn't how I'm meant to live. Like this is
Yeah.
not how the human body is meant to exist in the world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to go in there because I have to pay bills,
Same.
right? And I have to pay
Yeah.
for food and I have to all of that. Um, but when I work at home, it's completely different. Like because I'm just here on my own, so it's my world. Like and I'm outside of all of that, and I don't have to participate in all of that. Like, and like that, I think that's healthy. Like, because that's what the system like isn't designed for human beings, but they try to shunt us into it, right?
Hmm.
Um, but we don't realize that's happening, like at the time, because we're young, we're children, right? And then when we grow up and we deconstruct or whatever, like um, we eventually you start to realize it, and you start to disembody yourself from it. But disembodying yourself from it comes with a cost, because when you go back into it again, it wears you down more than it would have done before, because you numbed yourself to it. You kind of built up resistance to it, because like this is just how it is. I have to deal with it. And like I remember every time I bumped into capitalism, even before I deconstructed, I felt uncomfortable. Like just in my body, I felt like I don't like I don't like all these people like doing things for themselves and putting themselves first, and like everyone rushing around and trying to get everywhere fast. And I was like, what I didn't realize at the time was like that was anti-capitalist like energy, like, but I didn't see that at the time. Um, but it was always there, right? Because that was my humanity, like calling me out, like, no, you don't have to be part of this. This is not how things are meant to be. Like, and I kind of wish more people knew that.
That, yes, exactly. That is an excellent segue. That like you have the strength of an Enneagram 4. Um, the
I am
calling
an Enneagram 4. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
calling out the inauthenticity and being able to see and name that, like you said, when other people can't. So Taylor and I are Enneagram 3s. And so our theme song is I Can Do It With a Broken Heart.
Yeah.
It's the Enneagram 3 theme song. She's up there on stage at the Eras Tour and she's singing and dancing and she's so happy. And this the light of her life and she's the height of her career. Meanwhile, in real life, her 6-year relationship is falling apart. She rebounds with this terrible guy and he doesn't do anything for her that he said he was going to do. And so I don't know, what how we can describe that relationship that we don't know anything about, but she started dating someone who was very unpopular and is a bit of an asshole, and she discovered that the hard way. And it's her life, but it is not easy for an Enneagram 3 to be living in a life that is wildly unpopular. So what makes you happy is getting a ton of negative feedback, and that's like the worst thing we can think of is negative feedback. So yeah, there's these jokes about Taylor's productivity during the pandemic and also now during a global tour. And she's self aware enough to write a line about how she uses work as a distraction or an outlet for this misery that she's in. She's like, I'm crying, but I'm so productive. And she admits that her choices are sometimes, not the healthiest or maybe create some of the misery she's in, but then sometimes that it's completely unwarranted and she's doing all the right things and she tries so hard and it's a very fun song with a fun beat, so please do not get super depressed by this, but these very concerning lyrics are a great lesson to learn about the self-destructive tendencies of threes because we look so happy, we look like everyone should be jealous of us, like we're the top of the world, and we don't stop to let ourselves feel anything. Look how productive we are and look how we fooled everyone and how good we are at our jobs. It's very show business of the show must go on, and that is literal for Taylor. Like really, absolutely, that's she could not have just broken down for a week and not done anything. But it's true that it's funny in a sad way. We do get impressed with ourselves for how great we're performing under intense stress. Look at me, I'm so happy, and like I must be so talented and so gifted that I can keep performing at this level even though I really need to be taking a break and I'm going through intense heartache. And she sees it as proof of how talented and how working she is. And I would say most Enneagram threes do. When in reality, we're about to hit a wall. And I'm glad that Taylor herself builds in these days to ward off the burnout. And she just like stays in her hotel room in recovery. And then she has time in between legs of this global tour. And I think we all need to learn from that because if you are running at this pace and you are constantly feeling like you relate to, I can do it with a broken heart, please build in some time and space that if you relate to the song too much, schedule a vacation, get some therapy, take a little breather, slow down a little bit, because you're going to hit a wall and learn to feel your feelings will literally save your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, and Taylor Swift, to be fair to her, she kept a lot of her private life private for a long time.
Yeah.
That long term relationship was really not in the public eye. Um, um, and and people knew who it was, but and I was surprised when it ended. Actually, I was like, I thought this was
Mhm.
going to be the one. Like, I thought this was going to be it. And then to
So did
find
she.
yeah, I think yeah, and I didn't know that she'd rebounded with somebody else. Like, I don't keep up with all her private life, um, but obviously it's very clear that that happened. But that's just makes her human, I guess. It's just part of that can happen.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
um, and she just processes all her grief and stuff with songwriting. Um, and that's a perfectly valid thing to do. Like I was saying earlier, it's a good way to process stuff. I hope she does have a therapist. I really do. But I'm sure she does. But she can certainly afford one. So
Yeah.
probably afford
Well,
about
and it's
10.
interesting.
But
Yeah, I would say it's interesting how timeless this album is, but also how specifically rooted in time it is to have the I Look in People's Windows song, which is for me very clearly about social media. Is like you're seeing everybody with their holidays and their wine and their friends and family, and everything's picture perfect. And then she talks about like this guy's going to move on with the internet starlet of the day, that there's some like social media fame that is going to be equivalent to the talent and work and effort that she's put in this guy's eyes, or like there's like all of these references to like the black dog is about like she sees, I assume Joe Alwyn, we don't really know, but she sees that his find my friend or location pin, like they had it in a relationship so they could see where each other are, and she saw that his location was still turned on, he forgot to turn it off, and he walks into some pub and she's imagining that like he's dating someone younger and she's not going to recognize their favorite song, and like there's all these internet kind of references throughout this. So that's it's kind of interesting that it's like yes, it's timeless, and she's referring back to like Cassandra of Troy, the princess and prophetess that was cursed by Apollo, but then she's also talking about like find my location on a pin in a pub that she's not in. So anyway, that's it's kind of interesting how she kind of plays with both literary elements and like very 2024 kind of elements.
yeah, yeah. Oh wow, this has been great. We've been going for quite a while now.
Oh
Like,
yeah, sorry, it's been
yeah,
about an hour, but
yeah, no, absolutely worth it. I don't mind at all. I love it when we get conversations going that are just, when you kind of get going and discover loads of things and have great conversations. So that's what this podcast is all about, like the art of conversation. So yeah, we could probably do like another hour on this album at least.
absolutely, yeah.
Maybe we could do a part two on some of the later songs or whatever at some point. Maybe we'll see.
We'll
But
see.
this has been really really great, and I've learned a lot, and it's been really good talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
You always have such great insights on Taylor's songs. So yeah,
Thank you. Yeah. I think the most healing thing to end with is the Thank You, Amy song, because it really proves like when we're talking about grief, often we run into a concept called spiritual bypassing, which is like,
yeah,
oh, everything happens for a reason, or like, you know,
oh yeah,
it's the silver lining. Look at the good side of what came from it. But she really demonstrates in Thank You, Amy, how to like acknowledge the bad things happened, but without bypassing it, we are fully acknowledging the harm done here, okay? But being grateful that the bad things catapulted her into reacting and creativity that literally like it set the world on fire. Like now she is on this global tour, she's the biggest thing ever, she's the first billionaire to make it with solely just her music, and her anger and grief and everything that came out of that feud with Kim Kardashian and Kanye led to Reputation, and it led to everything we have now as a Swiftie fandom and all this great music. And maybe there's a place for that in our grief as well. So just what people can take from this is that we process through all these stages of grief and the denial and the anger and the bargaining and all of this depression and everything we have that are all mixed together. None of this is linear. Everything's very much all mixed in one big mess. But maybe
mm,
we can read back the manuscript of whatever we're grieving, and move into that acceptance, because all of these burdens gave us empathy and strength and something to rise above. And we wouldn't be here without it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Um, Always so much wisdom and encouragement from you,
Oh, thanks.
Jenna, honestly. So thank you. And you can catch Jenna. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, on Twitter, I am Jenna_DeWitt. And on Threads and Instagram, it's just Jenna DeWitt with none of the underscore there. But be sure to check out my website is invisiblecakesociety.com. I have all sorts of resources, poetry, essays, and all of my previous podcast episodes as well. So please check out invisiblecakesociety.com.
I love that. I love that website name. It's so cool. Like, and it is really great. I would really seriously check it out. Jenna creates a lot of great content and
Thanks.
lots of advocacy and lots of good stuff. So, yeah, thank you, Jenna. And I'm 100% you'll be back. Like either for a part two of this one or for whenever Taylor's next album is. There'll probably be one. There'll probably be another Taylor's version at some point this year, I suspect. So in the
I'm
second
not
half
going
of
to
the year.
call it because everybody's been trying to predict when Reputation Taylor's version is coming out. But when that comes out, you and I are going to talk. We're going to have another new episode full.
Absolutely, I am well up for that.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah,
was the album that got me into Taylor in the first place, right? So
that's awesome.
yeah, that's going to be a big one for me when that one hits. Yeah, so absolutely. So yeah, catch up with Jenna online, follow her stuff, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks.